Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. It's October 12th, 2014, and it's 6:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Want to update you on a few things and get into the main thing that I want to talk about, and I want to talk about the Ebola situation here in the United States, and I guess talk about the situation here in Dallas-Fort Worth area. I live in Fort Worth. Uh, wanted to I made a video recently where I went to the doctor's office and they said they were going to send me the lab work, or they had sent the lab work. They never sent it to me, so on the 22nd, when I go back, I'll get a copy of that lab results. But when I was at the office that day, the doctor had me go over and do the hemoglobin A1C test. That's a more specific test for your blood glucose level and to see if you have diabetes or whatever. The normal range is 4.8 to 5.6, and I came back with 6.2, which is pretty close to being diabetic, but they call it glucose intolerant and increased risk for diabetes, etc., etc. So I really need to watch my diet. But this is the same thing. Same thing happened a year ago when I went to the doctor. I had, the blood work done, and then he wanted me to have the same test done again, and the same results come back. The other thing I want to mention is the weather turned cooler here in Texas, and I hadn't had my heat on here in this apartment since last winter, and I kicked it on yesterday, but I put the thermostat way down where I didn't even expect it to come on. And a little bit later, the furnace came on, and it was kicking out heat unbelievable, which is surprising because that's one of the complaints that I've had here is the air conditioning works great for this place, but the furnace, the last few, all the winters that I've been in this apartment, the furnace runs and I can heat, we can heat our two bedrooms easily. My grandson and I both keep our doors closed most of the time, and we both have bathrooms and they heat up well, but the rest of the place stayed cold. Well, of course it wasn't real cold yesterday, but the rest of the place was just heat. Of course I went in and kicked the thermostat down and it was still running. Temperature kept going up. I went, kicked the thermostat down some more, and I kicked it down all the way. Furnace was still running, so I flipped it to the off position, the thermostat, and the furnace was still running. I kicked it over into air conditioning, and the furnace was still running. It got over to 90 in here, and they had just done a few days ago some work in my grandson's bathroom up in the ceiling. That's where some of the air conditioning stuff is, and the furnace, I don't know what exactly is up there. But they'd come in and done some work on it. And so anyway, the furnace is running like crazy. And I called it was of course at night, and I called the maintenance emergency number. And then I thought, what if they don't show up? Because, they had to be called in or whatever. I thought, man, what am I going to do? And then I thought about the breaker box, so I went in and killed the power to the air conditioning in the furnace, and that shut it off. Maintenance guy showed up and said it was a relay up in the ceiling in that bathroom where he had just worked on it a few days before. And so apparently it's working, but I don't know. He says if the relay is bad, that he may have to come back and put a new one in. So that takes us up to Ebola. Keep in mind, I worked 30 years in hospital security. I took EMT training and I'm passed and was certified by the state of Missouri. I was a CPR instructor at the hospital for years until they got upset with me and because I certified somebody without using the mannequin. And I think I told that story on here. And so they stripped me of my CPR instructor certification. Now, as you know, Duncan, I think was his name, the guy from Liberia, was it, that came over here and came down here in Dallas with Ebola. Uh, I'm just coming at you from my perspective, with my background. Hospitals have universal precaution procedures that all employees, not only when you're new, do you have to go through the training, and it doesn't matter whether you're an RN or an LPN or a lab tech or an X-ray tech or physical therapy tech or somebody who works in food service or somebody who works in the housekeeping department or somebody who works in security. Not only do all new employees have to take it, but I think every year you have to be refreshed in it along with other subjects that you have to be certified in it that you have taken it. And I think it's called the same, I think it's called universal precautions. At the hospital that I worked at, that's what it was called. I think at all the hospitals I worked at, so I'm sure that must be standardized, universal precautions. And that means that you basically use precautions when dealing with patients, uh, whether they have some infectious disease or not, you're to use those precautions on all patients, which means that you put on gloves before you do any procedures on any patient, before you take their temperature, uh, before you do, you know, even if you're reading it by the ear deal or the off the forehead, or I mean, even if you're not inserting a thermometer in their mouth, which you're probably not nowadays, you use those precautions. Now you might you might not use the mask when you're dealing with all patients, unless the patient comes in with a high fever or coughing or something, something like that. But gloves are one of the things that now you're not gloving up just to protect yourself from the patient, giving you something. You're gloving up to protect that patient, to make sure you don't give the person something or transfer something from the patient in the next bed. And, you know, the importance of gloves, not just gloves, but hand washing. I spent 11 years working at a small hospital, and they were really short-handed. And with my EMT training, I pitched in a lot of times and made carts for them, in the emergency room. A patient would leave, and I'd make up the cart, put the new sheet on, and do other things. And I did other things, for them. Some things that I probably shouldn't have done, but they were they were short-handed. The ER nurses had a meeting with the director of nurses at the hospital one time, an ER meeting, and the ER nurses said, well, we're short-handed here. We could use an extra member, an extra nurse here, and blah 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 blah. And then a couple of the nurses says, yeah, we wouldn't be able to make it here at nights without Jim Howard if he wasn't helping us. And the director of nurses What? What? What do you mean, the security guard? Well, he's not supposed to, And they said we couldn't make it without him, and the head nurse was freaking out. The director of nurses was freaking out. Uh, so I spent a lot of time helping out, and I don't have Ebola. I have hay fever, and the ragweed has driven me crazy the last few weeks. So I helped out a lot. I worked there 11 years at that hospital, and I think I might have had the flu one time in 11 years. I mean, I followed universal precautions. Of course, you have to. And hand washing is important. A patient comes in and you put on gloves and you go over and do something to the patient, and it's not just putting on gloves. There's You have to know how to properly and you have to follow the procedures. You have to properly take off the gloves. There's a way to take off the gloves, which you're taught. Uh, so you've gone over and you've taken care of a patient, taken their temperature or blood pressure, or whatever you've done, and you leave the patient, and then you take the gloves off properly, and then you wash your hands. And then a little bit later, because you may be going to another patient, or it wouldn't matter anyway, but even if you're going to go, then you're going to go back to that patient you've charted or whatever you've done, and you're going to go back to that patient. So you wash your hands, and then you put on gloves, and you go. I think people, well, of course, when this patient went to the emergency room, as you know, I'm sure you probably followed the case. He went in with a temperature, I think, of 103, and he was sent home. Now, 103 is very high for an adult. Children do run, as you know. I'm sure you probably have children, or you were a child. Uh, Warning bell should have gone off. He came from Africa. I mean, alarm bell should have been going off. The hospital sent him home. That's all going to be investigated. And I think some people were thinking that, well, he was black, so he was not admitted to the hospital or didn't get the kind of care. I don't think that's the case. But I do suspect, and I'm sure we'll probably find out, that he did not have health care insurance. Plus, he was from from outside the United States, so they knew, well, who's going to pay. So I think that may be what was a deciding factor in him being sent home. And look at what not having health care or not treating everybody. Look how look at the problems that causes. So he was sent home to infectious for, what was it, 2 or 3 days before he went back and was finally admitted. Something else I want to bring up. I'm sure you've all been following this because all the news media are just playing this thing up big time. Recently, a few days ago, a sheriff's deputy checked into a one of these emergency health care centers feeling sick, and he had been sent to this home or the apartment where this guy who came from Liberia was staying with some other people, and he had been sent there to give those people a written notice that they were to stay inside and not leave. They were in isolation. And he was sent there to have them sign, each one of them to sign a paper saying that they had been served with this information. And apparently, I'm not 100% sure on this, apparently, not only did, of course, he enter the residence, but 2 or 3 other, I think he was just a rank and file deputy sheriff, but I think a lieutenant went in with him and a sergeant, or it was, and then plus some type of healthcare workers, health department or somebody went in with him. So you had, I don't know, 5 or 6 people in there. Uh, anyway, then he checked in to a healthcare, and they had to, they had to evacuate the place because they, had to clear the place out because he came. It turned out he apparently is not infected. They checked. He didn't have it. Uh, I can understand him being really concerned. He said that his family was really concerned. There was some criticism of him of why in the world did he go to that healthcare center when he knew that he might have Ebola, and why didn't he call his doctor or do? And apparently he said that he did contact his doctor or somebody, and they said go right away to an emergency, hospital emergency care center. So I don't think that he did anything wrong. He panicked a little bit, but I guess his family was panicking too when they realized all this. Now, the sheriff, his boss, was on the news screaming and hollering and raving, apparently, that his people shouldn't have been sent out there for that was a federal government, that the federal government should have handled it. The sheriff's deputies or constables, or it varies from state to state, they serve court orders or whatever. Now, also the sheriff would just, we don't have the equipment. We don't have the equipment that we need. We don't have gloves. We don't have anything. We shouldn't have been sent out there or whatever. Fucking, he's the sheriff and in charge of the sheriff's department. Now, of course, the sheriffs I think are elected most states, which is a bad idea. So I'm sure he was elected. But if a magic wand could be fuckingly, if I could be, Jim, you are now, you are in charge, super in charge here. You have unlimited power. Uh, Civil service rules and regulations don't apply. You can just do, what I would fucking do is go there and say, Sheriff, come with me outside here. Okay, call in 3 or 4 of your cars. Okay, when the cars come in, we'd go over and we'd say, where is your box of gloves? Now, I bet you some of them probably have gloves now, but, where are your where in this patrol car are your box of gloves? Well, we don't have any. And go to the other, where are your boxes? Don't have any. Where don't have any. Where's your box of masks? The paper mask that you can put, don't have any, don't have any, don't have any. And I would just turn to the sheriff and then say, you're fired. And I would tell some of the sheriff's deputies or whatever, escort the sheriff to his fucking office, make sure he gets his personal belongings, nothing else, and then escort him off the property. And then I'd find out, probably who's the assistant, who's the deputy, sheriff and I would fucking, and then I'd explain to these officers that they weren't to go out on patrol until they had a box of gloves in their car and a box of mask in their car, and until they fucking knew when to use it and how to use that equipment, how to put the gloves on, how to properly take them off. Fuck. What a bunch of fucking idiots. Now, I don't know about the thing of going out and having them sign this piece of paper with. Now, if it was influenza or tuberculosis or okay, but put a mask on, put a gloves on, with Ebola, I wouldn't fucking have them sign the. Like I said, I worked hospital security and there were times that a patient was refusing treatment or something like that, and that I'd get called. I'd go up and the nurse would say, You know, he has to sign this. He's refusing treatment. He's leaving AMA, you know, against medical advice, and he has to sign this paper. And one time it was a pregnant nurse, and the guy was a belligerent, bad dude or whatever, and she kept shoving a pin into his hand, you know, and I was, no, he has to sign, he has to sign it. I thought he's gonna fucking stab her in the stomach with that pin. So at that hospital and other hospitals, I said, no, he doesn't have to sign. You and I mean, if I could get him to, you know, I tried, well, sir, would you just sign it, just so, if the person was adamant they're not going to sign, I don't have to sign, you can't make me sign, I'm an American citizen, all this fucking garbage, you know, then I would just say, okay, blah, 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 we're informing you that you're leaving against medical advice, and blah, it's all, if something happens, we're not responsible because you've been informed or whatever. And then I would just tell the nurse, write it down on the chart, and you can sign it. And if you want me to sign on the chart, I'll sign on the chart too, that we informed the person, and then out the door the person goes. In this case with Ebola, I wouldn't have had him signing a piece of paper. I'd have just gone there and documented, you know, outside, that they were verbally informed, and that would have been that. Uh, the hospital system that I worked at for 18 years, security was the hazmat response team uh, for the hospital. That means when something happened, we responded. Now, if out in the parking lot, there was a car crash, and the gas tank ruptured and was leaking, we didn't have the equipment to wash down the parking lot or do whatever, so we'd call the fire department. But on mercury, mercury spills, uh, cancer IV solutions or whatever, which are highly, highly hazmat material, and in other materials, we handled that situation. We had the gloves, we had the mask, we had, uh, this is not rocket science, but I'm not worried about an epidemic spreading across the United States I'm not even worried about an epidemic spreading, throughout Dallas, but these people worry me, the hospital turning somebody away, and you have, like I said, I worked hospital security for 30 years. We knew where the boxes were of the gloves and where the masks were, and if a patient, uh, some hospitals might have the material right there at everybody's door, but definitely if the patient was in isolation, the stuff is at the door. There's a sign on the door telling you the type of universal precautions being taken, whether you need a mask or not. And but all the security officers, we all had a little pouch on our belt, and we carried gloves in in case we were out in the parking lot and somebody collapses before they come in, or somebody falls out in the parking lot and they're bleeding, and they just need to get their act together. And there again, I'm I, I'm sure that, but this Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital needs to be investigated, and they will be. There'll be investigations, maybe congressional hearings about it, and police officers and EMTs and paramedics and But you are going to, they all need to be properly trained. That should be part of their training, and it should be refreshed, yearly or whatever, on proper ways to handle situations like this. But you have to handle situations. I worked at another hospital that I worked at for 5.5 years. In addition to all the things that I was the fire marshal at the hospital, I I did every Monday morning part of the new employee orientation on uh, codes, uh, code blue, code gray for weather, and Dr. Red Fire, that type, and parking and all kinds of stuff. I'm just saying that we did a lot of things. Well, at that hospital, in addition to OSHA regulations, we had to, not just security, not just hospital rules and regulations, and not just preventing, attempting to prevent crime and or evil, and not just, uh, in addition, we picked up patient valuables. New patients who came in who had valuables, we would secure their valuables until they were ready to go home. Not only that, if a patient was going to surgery, we would have to go, we would go to the room and secure their valuables. And then when they came back from surgery and when they were competent, when the uh, medication wore off or whatever, and when they wanted it, then they would call and we would take it back. Many of those patients were in isolation of some sort. Um, so, you've got to be prepared for all of these type of situations. But if you are, if you're worried about Ebola, or not just Ebola, the flu, which, I don't hear in the United States, what is Ebola going to, how many people are going to die here in the United States? 2, 10? Uh, Not very many, I would think. How many this year are going to die from the flu? 20, 30,000 probably, I'm guessing. Uh, you want to protect your, and there's also other things. Not even talking about gun violence. Uh, you want to protect yourself and you want to protect your children or whatever. Fucking wash your hands. Wash your hands. Like I said, uh, well, wash your hands. Uh, what else did I want to say about this? Just that we shouldn't, I mean, everybody, you can just tell, even National Public Radio, has said, we are keeping you advised. They were doing their fundraising uh, thing the last week. Maybe they're still doing, and they would be announcing that, oh, we're still covering, the Ebola situation in Dallas. We will keep you updated on that. We have, people on the scene or whatever. Uh, it's interesting to read this, but don't fucking pay. There's some Republican. I don't think he's a congressman. I think maybe he might be maybe he is. He's a Republican, so he could fucking be that crazy. But I think that might have been a state legislature or whatever. He's calling for anybody who has Ebola to be humanely put to death. I can remember when HIV first came out. I can remember watching like the McNeil Lear report on National Public Television. Police officers and even EMTs and ambulance paramedics were refusing to treat or pick up some of these people and transport them. We do have, but we don't have the best medical care in the United States, and we have a lot of problems. And a lot of problems are caused by the fact that even with Obamacare, we really do not have universal health care in the United States. And probably every country in Europe, unfortunately not every country in Africa, not Liberia and some of those other countries, but the rest of the world has excellent medical care because everybody gets treated. You don't have, and so when somebody gets sick, they can see their doctor or they can go to the hospital, and that's not the situation here in the United States. And that's an we spend billions and billions on weapons and airplanes that cost $1 billion and ships that cost several $1 billion and just massive amounts of money. You want to protect your national security, give the United States, the citizens of the United States, and not just the citizens, but everybody who's in the country, universal health care. So everybody gets treated. Nobody gets turned away from a hospital because they don't have insurance or because of their color or because, they come from a foreign country. But you can't. Two problems here in the United States. Our educational system. There's a lot of problems with that need to be corrected. I worked at a hospital and there was a lab tech, older lady, who the hospital liked a lot because the hospital, when I started working for that hospital, there was one hospital, then they built another hospital, and they ended up then buying 10 or 11 other hospitals and owning them in the greater Kansas City area or whatever. And the hospital kind of liked her because she was willing to work. I think she was from Venezuela, I believe. But she was willing to work. If you wanted to work, she would work wherever you wanted to work. And she was observed many times and reported. She'd come to work and put on a pair of gloves and be doing her work back in the lab with the same pair of gloves on. And then she'd get called down to go to ER with the same pair of gloves on, draw blood from a patient or whatever, and go back. She wasn't changing her gloves after each. I remember I was working that day in the emergency room, and like when I did my EMT training, I had to do X number of hours in the emergency room working as an EMT. But this guy was a paramedic trainee, and he came in, and they had several problems with him, and the ER staff told him, that's no, you don't do that or whatever. And then they I forget whether he was drawing blood or giving a injection of tetanus or what, but they saw him. He went over and he took the alcohol rub and he rubbed the spot, and then he took the needle or whatever and stuck the patient someplace else, not on the area that he had cleaned. That was it. They called the fire department that sent him there and that was it. He was no longer a paramedic trainee. His career as a paramedic was over because of that. So you got to watch out for stupidity. You got to watch out for people who don't follow the rules or whatever. But we're not going to have this. The United States is not going to be like Africa. Our healthcare system has a lot of flaws in it, but it's much, much better. And my advice to you all is wash your hands. Okay, thank you very much for watching.